Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes. What happens when one of Hollywood's most accomplished actresses, a woman whose career spans over 2 decades of critical success, box office hits, and genuine artistic bravery, steps onto a talk show expecting professional discourse only to find herself in the midst of an ambush disguised as journalism. When an artiste, whose talent has been proven time and time again, faces a host who believes success equals guilt, that privilege cancels out achievement, and that every career choice must be justified to someone who's never created anything of comparable scale. What you're about to witness is not just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It's not a moment of tension spiraling out of control. It's the moment Scarlett Johansson, an actress who's navigated Hollywood's complexities with intelligence, integrity, and thoughtfulness, realizes that some hosts don't seek dialogue. They seek confession, and when they don't get it, they wield their power to silence you. Scarlett had agreed to appear on The View to promote her new thriller. At 39, she was at the peak of her career, critically acclaimed in dramatic roles, commercially successful in blockbuster franchises, and a producer with a deep understanding of the industry. She was no flash in the pan star. She'd earned her place as a genuine artist. Her publicist had made the usual arrangements. Focus on the film. Keep the questions respectful and relevant, and avoid surprise attacks on controversial topics. Standard protocol for someone of Scarlett's stature, whose time was valuable and whose presence on a promotional tour was a strategic choice, not an act of desperation. The producers of The View had agreed to these conditions. They knew who Scarlett was, not just a box office draw, but a talented artist, someone whose achievements were built over decades of hard work. But Joy Behar had other plans. She decided that Scarlett's career choices, her roles in films that some activists had criticized, her decisions about representation, these needed to be confronted, not discussed or explored in good faith, but attacked. It wasn't about understanding or dialogue. It was about holding someone accountable by publicly scrutinizing their every move. What Joy failed to grasp was that Scarlett Johansson had made it this far by carefully considering every role, every project. For Scarlett, every decision balanced artistic merit with social responsibility in ways Joy, who had never faced such choices, couldn't understand. This wasn't about whether celebrities should face criticism. It was about the difference between criticism that seeks understanding and criticism that seeks destruction. It was about accountability that builds versus accountability that simply tears down. Joy thought she was doing important activism, confronting privilege, speaking for marginalized communities. In reality, she was using social justice language as a weapon for personal gain, claiming moral authority she hadn't earned, and abusing her platform to judge someone who had spent 2 decades navigating Hollywood's complexities with grace and responsibility. Scarlett Johansson had had enough. After 2 decades of navigating complex situations with intelligence and dignity, she reached her limit when Joy attempted to prosecute her without merit. What followed was one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history, a moment when Scarlett, under intense pressure, demonstrated that grace under pressure doesn't mean accepting abuse. What you're about to witness isn't just another media clash. It's a moment where a star, long used to playing the game with composure, refused to play by rigged rules. Whoopi smiled warmly and gestured toward their guest. "We're thrilled to have you here to talk about your new thriller. Really, buzz has been incredible." Scarlett returned the smile, settling into her seat with practiced ease. "Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about the film. It's a project I'm genuinely proud of." "Well," Joy cut in, her voice slicing through the pleasant atmosphere, "I think our audience wants to hear about more than just your movie. There are some questions about your recent career choices that deserve answers." The studio's energy dropped. Off camera, Scarlett's publicist shifted uneasily. This was not the interview they'd agreed on. "I'm sorry," Scarlett said calmly, though confusion flickered in her eyes. "What questions are you referring to?" Joy leaned forward, eyes bright with the satisfaction of someone about to spring a trap. "Let's start with the elephant in the room. Your decision to take on roles many feel weren't yours to portray. Isn't there a pattern of you stepping into stories that don't belong to you?" The other hosts exchanged surprised looks. Evente hadn't expected this. Scarlett inhaled slowly, media training activating in real time. Every role I take is considered thoughtfully. I approach my work with respect and authenticity, and have had meaningful conversations about representation over the years. Respect and authenticity, Joy echoed, her tone dripping with skepticism. Interesting, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like opportunism, taking roles that could have gone to people who actually share the character's background. Joy, Whoopi tried gently, sensing the danger. Maybe we should know, Whoopi. Joy didn't look at her. We talk about representation all the time on this show, and when someone sitting right here contributes to the problem, we're supposed to pretend everything's fine. Scarlett's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. Representation is important, but blindsiding someone during what was supposed to be a promotional interview isn't the right way to have this conversation. Blindsiding. Joy laughed, humorless. This is journalism's. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be in that chair. The sweetheart landed like a slap. Scarlett's eyes hardened. I can handle tough questions, she said, voice cooling. What I won't accept is being lectured by someone who came into this with an agenda instead of an interest in actual dialogue. An agenda? Joy shot back, her voice rising. My agenda is accountability, asking real questions, instead of tossing softballs about your latest movie. Then ask me real questions, Scarlett snapped, leaning forward. Ask about the craft, the industry, work. But don't pretend this is some noble quest for truth when you're clearly fishing for a viral moment. The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators hesitated. Joy's face flushed. Did you just accuse me of exploiting this for ratings? I'm saying, Scarlett replied evenly, that if you wanted a serious discussion about representation, you would have told me before we started. Instead, you ambushed me on live television. That tells me this is about spectacle, not substance. Sarah tried desperately to redirect. Maybe we could focus on how the industry has evolved. No, Joy cut her off. I want to hear why Scarlett thinks she can take any role she wants without considering the impact on marginalized communities. Scarlett looked at Joy for a long moment before speaking. When she did, her voice was firm and deliberate. You're making assumptions about my decisions and values based on incomplete information and a narrative you walked in here ready to push. Incomplete information. Joy scoffed. Your filmography is the information, and you've appointed yourself the judge of those choices. Scarlett said, Quiet. The quiet carried weight. Someone has to... Joy snapped. The words hung in the air like a confession. Scarlett's eyes narrowed. So, tell me, Joy, what qualifies you? What's your acting background? What roles have you turned down for the sake of representation? What meaningful work have you done in this area beyond sitting at a desk and passing judgment? Joy's face reddened deeper. I don't need to be an actor to recognize problematic behavior. Problematic behavior, Scarlett repeated, leaning back with a gaze that could cut steel. You know what I find problematic? A host who tries to publicly shame a guest without doing basic research on their actual work, values, or the contributions they've made to the very causes you're weaponizing. This isn't about your charity work. Joy pushed back sharply, determined to maintain control of the narrative she'd been building. This isn't about your charity work, isn't it? Scarlett's voice finally rose, real anger coming through. Because if you'd done your homework, if you cared about the issues you claim to champion, you'd know I've spent years supporting organizations that promote diversity in film. You'd know I've used my platform to amplify marginalized voices. You'd know I've turned down roles because I felt they should go to other actors. Joy opened her mouth, but Scarlett continued, 20 years of restraint breaking all at once. But you don't know any of that, do you? Because this isn't about progress or dialogue. It's about you needing to feel morally superior. And you chose me as your target today because you thought I'd be easy to steamroll. How dare you? Joy hissed, her voice trembling with fury. How dare you come on my show and lecture me your show? Scarlett interrupted, looking around with exaggerated confusion. I thought this was the view, not the Joy Behar. Are Whoopi, Sarah, and Sunny. This props in your ambush, or do they get to speak to Whoopi? Tried to regain control. Let's all just take a breath. No, Whoopi, Joy snapped, so forcefully that Whoopi actually leaned back. I'm not going to let this privileged actress turn herself into a victim. Privileged? Scarlett repeated with a bitter laugh. There it is. The magic word meant to shut down every discussion. Yes, Joyanne. Privileged. I'm successful. I'm fortunate, but that doesn't mean I forfeit the right to basic respect. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to attack my character based on assumptions and half-formed narratives. Joy stood abruptly, her voice so loud audience members clapped hands over their ears. I'm asking you to take responsibility for your actions. And I'm telling you, Scarlett replied, rising as well, matching Joy's energy with controlled fire, that your approach is hostile and counterproductive. You want a conversation about representation? Tin. Ave. 1. But don't pretend this spectacle is anything other than you trying to score points at my expense. Production assistants moved frantically. Audience members lifted their phones to film. The other hosts looked terrified. You want to talk about performance? Joy's voice cracked emotion, overwhelming even her talent for a staged outrage. Your whole career is a performance, taking roles that aren't yours, telling stories that aren't yours, and then playing surprised when people call you out. Scarlett stepped closer, composure showing its first cracks. You're right about one thing, Joy. I'm performing civility for someone who invited me here under false pretenses just to humiliate me. I'm performing patience with someone who clearly has no interest in real conversation. False pretenses. Joy shrieked. Everything I'm saying is legitimate criticism. Legitimate criticism involves questions and listening. Scarlett shot back. What you're doing is lobbing accusations and getting angry when I don't immediately confess to whatever sins you've decided I'm guilty of. Sarah tried one last time. Maybe we can move forward and talk about Scarlett's new film. We're not moving on to anything, Joy declared, stabbing a finger toward Scarlett. Not until she acknowledges the harm she's caused. The harm I've caused? Scarlett echoed, incredulous. Joy, listen to yourself. You're talking about harm while you're actively trying to destroy someone's reputation on live television based on your own grievances and desire to feel important. Personal grievances. Joy screamed. Myth. This isn't personal. This is justice. Justice? Scarlett barked a disbelieving laugh. You want justice? Then let's talk about ambushing someone who came here in good faith. Let's talk about using your platform to shame instead of discuss. Let's talk about demanding compliance with your worldview and calling it accountability. Joy slammed her hand on the table so hard Sarah's coffee cup trembled. Don't you dare call me a bully. Then don't act like one, Scarlett replied instantly. Her voice steady and lethal. The words hit Joy like a physical blow. For a moment, she was speechless. Then, with a cold edge, she turned to the staff. Get her out of here. Right now. Scarlett stared at her. You're having me removed because I don't agree with your assessment of my character. I'm having you removed because you're disrespectful and refusing accountability, Joy said, but the conviction was gone. The justification hollow. Scarlett looked at each host. Whoopi looked mortified. Sarah was on the verge of tears. Sunny stared at her hands, unable to look up. This is unbelievable, Scarlett said softly, but her voice carried across the studio. You invite someone onto your show, attack them, refuse to hear their answers, and then eject them for not capitulating. This is exactly the kind of abuse of power you claim to stand against. Security, Joy said, not taking her eyes off Scarlett. She was fully committed to this disastrous course of action, even as it reflected terribly on her dot. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the set, looking painfully uncomfortable. They clearly understood how absurd it was to escort Scarlett Johansson out for defending herself against an unprovoked attack. The audience murmured, some standing for a better view, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Scarlett looked at the guards, then back at Joy. When she spoke, her voice carried disappointment as much as anger. So this is who you really are. When you can't win an argument, when someone pushes back against your attacks, you use your power to silence them. Get her out, Joy repeated. Her voice trembled whether from anger or the dawning realization that she'd lost control. It wasn't clear. Scarlett calmly picked up her purse and stood, dignity intact, despite the absurdity of being ordered off a set simply for defending herself. I don't need security to escort me. I can walk out on my own. She turned toward the audience. Many were on their feet. Some had begun applauding her stand against what they were seeing. Thank you for witnessing this, she said, her voice echoing through the studio. Remember what happened today? Remember what it looks like when manufactured outrage is confronted with substance. Scarlett started toward the exit, but Joy couldn't leave it alone. She couldn't let Scarlett walk away with the moral victory. That's right, Joy called after her. Walk away just like you always do when someone calls you out. Scarlett stopped. The room went silent, holding its breath. She turned slowly. The professional mask was gone, replaced by something raw and honest enough to make even the security guards take a step back. Walk away like I always do, she repeated quietly, her voice carrying with devastating clarity. Joya, I've spent 15 minutes trying to have a civil conversation with you while you've done nothing but attack me. I answered your questions. I explained my choices. I treated you with respect, even when you offered me none. Joy folded her arms, convinced she'd regain the upper hand by provoking a reaction. And now you're running from the truth. The truth. Scarlett walked back toward the set, each step deliberate. Let's talk about the truth. The audience was silent. Even the camera operators had frozen. The truth, Scarlett said, her voice strengthening, is that you invited me here to promote my film, then blindsided me with accusations you never intended to discuss honestly. The truth is that when I didn't immediately validate your narrative, you became hostile. The truth is that you repeatedly cut off your own co-hosts when they tried to guide this conversation somewhere productive. She gestured toward Whoopi, Sarah, and Sunny, giving voice to what they couldn't say aloud. You called me sweetheart in a condescending tone. You dismissed everything I said that didn't fit the story you wanted to tell. And now you're calling security because I refuse to accept your judgment as absolute. Joy's face flushed it not with rage this time, but with embarrassment. The reality of what she'd done was finally sinking in. I was trying to hold you accountable, she said weakly. No, Joy, Scarlett replied, firm and unshakable. You were trying to humiliate me. There's a difference between accountability and public shaming, between criticism-seeking understanding and criticism-seeking destruction. What you did was the latter, and everyone in this room knows it. Whoopi finally spoke, her voice soft. Scarlett, maybe we can start over. Have a real conversation. Whoopi, Scarlett said gently. With respect, there's no starting over from this. Your co-host just called security because I wouldn't accept her verdict on my character. That's not journalism. That's not activism. That's abuse of power, and everyone here knows it. The words hung in the air, undeniable, devastating. Scarlett turned and walked off the set again. This time Joy said nothing, perhaps recognizing that any response would only make things worse. As Scarlett disappeared backstage, the audience erupted into sustained applause, not scattered, not uncertain, but overwhelming support. For how she had handled an impossible situation with grace under fire, the remaining hosts sat stunned, the weight of what had unfolded pressing down on the room. The cameras lingered for a few seconds before cutting to commercial, but the damage was already done. The most explosive confrontation in daytime television history had just taken place, and it had revealed exactly who Joy Behar became when someone refused to accept her judgment as unquestioned authority.